Hi guys, welcome to my channel. I'm Caroline, this is Short Skirts and Sarcasm, and this video is a belated wrap up of November and December of 2021, and I'm gonna go through each month separately in alphabetical order by title. And I do apologize that this is so late, but I basically took a break for December, and then I thought New Year's content would be more important than old year content, but now I'm caught up on New Year's content, I can go back and make old year content. Logic, it makes sense. So to start off, I read City of Ghosts by Victoria Schwab, and this is the first in the Cassidy Blake series. Cassidy is a teenager who can see ghosts. Her best friend is Jacob, a ghost. Her parents are ghost hunters, but they can't see ghosts. So they start to make a TV show about ghosts and ghost hunting in the most haunted cities. So for book number 1, they go to Edinburgh. She gets into trouble, unleashes a ghost accidentally. She has to work together with Jacob, her ghost best friend, to try to stop the ghost from harvesting souls or something. And it's a middle grade, it's pretty short, so I mean, she does win out. I don't think that's a spoiler. And there's also more to the series, so it was solid. I really liked it. I did read the second one last month, and so I want to finish the series this year, and I think I can do it because they're pretty short. Then I read Fire by Kristen Cashore. I totally forgot that I read this because it wasn't my favorite. It's the second in the Graceling series. I really enjoyed Graceling. Fire is not about the people from the first book. It's about I think the main character's name is Fire. So we follow a completely different set of characters. Apart from the main character, I can't remember any of the other characters, but essentially it's a continuation of the larger plot line in this world. And I mean, I see that I rated it 3 stars. I think the writing was solid. I think the plot is solid. It's just maybe it's not my thing, and that's why I forgot it immediately. Then I read Gods of Jade and Shadow by Silvia Moreno Garcia. She's also written Mexican Gothic, which I read last year and loved. I didn't love this one as much, but it was still really solid. I don't have it here to show you because I let Chloe borrow it, even though she's the one that gave it to me in the first place after I read Mexican Gothic. So I'm sure I'll get it back soon, but I do recommend this. It's about a girl, I can't remember what her name is, but she is living with her grandfather and her mother, and I think a cousin. She's the sort of Cinderella of this family. She's not treated very well. And then she, while cleaning, accidentally releases the spirit of an ancient Maya god who is like, help me get revenge on my twin brother. She's like, does that mean I get to leave the farm? And he's like, yeah. And she's like, cool, yes, let's do that. And it's a great adventure story. I think there's a lot of personal growth that the main character goes through, and that the rest of her family does as well, because they're trying to, catch her and make the spirit go back to the box that he was trapped in. And then I read I'm Thinking of Ending Things by Ian Reid. I haven't yet watched the movie. My friend watched it and she gave me a brief synopsis, and I think they added a bunch of weird stuff that was definitely not in the book. So I'm a little bit apprehensive for watching the movie, but I did really enjoy the book. It was a solid horror in my opinion. It wasn't amazing, but it also wasn't a dud. And I liked the ending. I guess that is a controversial opinion because I've seen other booktubers really not like it, and that's fine, I guess. But the main character is going on a extended drive with her boyfriend to meet his parents, and on the drive there things start getting weird, and then when they're at the parents' house things start getting even weirder. And I don't want to spoil it for you, but I think it had pretty good tension, and we get to see their relationship arc up to that point. It's a pretty new relationship, and the main character is thinking of ending things, and so she thinks back over their relationship and what could be different, what could be better, blah blah. So it is, I think, a good mix of introspective stuff and also just weirdness. Then I read In a Dark Dark Wood by Ruth Ware. I'm going to give this away. This was a secondhand book. It's a thriller, and it's like a solid thriller. I could kind of see where it was going though, and like I would like to say I'm really easy to dupe, so if I see it coming, it's really obvious. So Nora has been invited by her former friend Claire. They haven't seen each other for 10 years, but Claire is getting married, and she's not inviting Nora to the wedding, but she is inviting her to the bachelorette party in a remote cabin in a dark wood. And then things get weird. People in the party, they start getting a weird vibe. People start being mean to each other, and then like a pretty dramatic thing happens, and everyone is like scrambling to find out what exactly happened, who did what, who was where, when, and has something like irreversibly bad happened, or was it just kind of strange? So it's a solid, if you like a thriller, I think this is a like read it and then pass it on to your friends kind of book. Then I read Madam by Phoebe Wynn, and I absolutely loved it. I was not expecting to love it as much as I did. I thought it was going to be pretty solid. It's a sort of dark academia book. A teacher has been recruited to work at a school in rural Scotland. It's an all-girls school, and it's really prestigious, and they haven't had any new hires for I think over 10 years. So it's a big deal. So she goes there, and like all of a sudden, like her vibe with her students is really weird. Like all her students are saying really weird things, and like they're not really that interested in studies. And oh yeah, she does classics. So at first she's like, maybe they just don't like Latin dead language stuff. But then they're like, well, why would we study this when we have more important things to do? And she's like, what do you mean more important things? And they're like, oh, well, we can't tell you that. You're new. So she's like, something's off. So her relationship with her colleagues and with some of her students, like she tries to like make friends among her colleagues, and it kind of works, kind of doesn't. Like there's something off, and she can feel it, and she tries to get to the bottom of it. And wow. Another really good read, I read Pandora's Jar by Natalie Haynes. I read her other fiction book, what's it called? 1,000 Ships, and I thought it was extremely okay. This might be because I was like in the middle of just reading a bunch of Trojan War retellings, and so it really didn't seem like new or groundbreaking to me. Maybe if I reread it, I would have a different opinion. I haven't read Children of Jocasta. I want to, but I haven't yet. So this is a nonfiction book that examines popular Greek myths and really focuses on the women of the Greek myths more than they have been centered in other like tellings and retellings and academic writing. And I really enjoyed Natalie Haynes' writing here. I thought it was very, very informative. It was to the point. It was not ever like long-winded or felt like she was talking down to her audience, being like, well, you should know this because it's a popular myth and like classics, blah, blah. I'm not a big classics head, so I really appreciated that. Like I dabble in mythology, I guess you could say, but it's not wholly my thing. So I did appreciate the writing, the subject matter. I was like taking notes. I was like furiously underlining and highlighting and taking notes, and it's, I think, something that I will reread. I will definitely reread my notes. And it's also given me a better understanding and appreciation of other like myth retellings that I've read, including 1,000 Ships. So well done, Natalie. Then I read Poirot Investigates by Agatha Christie. This is a short story collection where Poirot investigates some stuff and solves some crimes, and it was a fun time. I can't remember anything about it, but I think that's mostly because short stories do not stick in my brain at all. They just flush out. But I guess if I reread this book, it'll be like reading it the first time. So I can't complain. Then I read Star of Acre by Andrew Michael Hurley. I really wanted to like this book. I did not. I thought the premise was good, execution was bad, and it has burned some things into my brain that I can never unsee. unfortunately for me. I'm not big on like imagining things. I find it very difficult. So I guess what you could say is that his writing is so descriptive that even I could picture it, which is good. I do admire that. However, the stuff he did write that I pictured was disturbing and like not in an interesting way. Like, I do enjoy reading horrors and thrillers and all that. It was just like, but why though? Why? There's no reason for this. Absolutely not. So the premise is that there's a couple that live in an inherited large house called Starved Acre in the surrounding land area. There's a tree on their property that used to be used for hangings, and so everyone's like, the tree is haunted, obviously, and they're like, haha, ghosts don't exist. And then, very unfortunately, their son passes away, and the wife of this couple keeps saying that the house is now haunted by the spirit of the deceased son. And they call in like some weird cult people to examine it. And like, I liked all that. I liked the premise so much. Then we just like dropped in some information that like didn't really make sense, and the ending didn't really make sense. And I feel like Andrew Michael Hurley likes being like vague and leaving his readers on a but what really happened note, which in general I like, but I think he leans into the mystery a little too much. And it's like, I don't even know if I should care about these people. I don't actually care what happens to them, and now it's just weird. Then I read The Doll Factory by Elizabeth McNeil. I read her other book, Circus of Wonders, I think earlier this year. It might have been last year. Somewhat recently. I loved it. I wanted to read this book. I loved it too. A little bit less. I think Circus of Wonders is better, but essentially our main character is one of a set of identical twins. They are very tall and ginger, so they are noticeable. And she has a deformity in her collarbone, and so she's even more like recognizable than her sister. Her sister was like always the pretty one, but then got, I think it was smallpox, and it ruined her skin. And so there's a bit of animosity between the sisters, which is relevant to the story, but they work in a doll factory. But the main character, what's her name? Iris, wants to be an artist, and she wants to join the Pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood. However, this is a problem because she's not a brother. So she comes to this arrangement with a member of the Pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood that he teaches her to paint, and she'll model for him. And so they're doing that. And then at some point, this kid she knows introduces her to this dude he knows, and he's a real creep. So he decides that they're destined to be together, and he stalks her, and it's kind of upsetting. No, it's really upsetting. So, like, be prepared. Like, everything turns out okay at the end. So, like, if you want to read this but don't want to read, like, horrible murder stuff, she's fine at the end of this. I'll tell you that. But it's a wild ride, and I was super into it. Oh, I should also say this is a historical fiction. It's set in 1850, in case you weren't familiar with the ins and outs and timings of the Pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood. I should have said that earlier. And then I read The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern. This was a reread. I think this is my third time reading it. I read it again last year as well. So 2 years in a row I've read this. It holds up. It's a 5-star read. It's so good. I love it. Cecilia, is it Celia? Yeah. Celia is a weird orphan. She shows up on her dad's doorstep and is like, hello. And he's like, I guess I have a daughter now. Turns out he's a magician, and he has a long-standing bet going on with this other magician, and they both have like students, and they engage in a game. And so he's like, well, I have the most bestest player now because I'm the most bestest magician, and since we are a family, she is also the most best. And his magician colleague is like, haha, no, she's not. I have my own kid. And then they engage in like this mysterious game, and it's set in this magical circus that is entirely black and white and ethereal and magical, and the setting is just really beautiful and atmospheric. Like, I feel like I can smell the caramel popcorn, and reading this book always makes me hungry because everyone always has some great snacks. Like, why don't I have snacks? I should have gone to the store before reading this. But it gets better on every reread, in my opinion. So if you like ethereal popcorn snacks, then this is the book for you. And then last, I read The Viscount Who Loves Me by Julia Quinn. This is the second Bridgerton romance book novel, and it was a quick read. I thought it was better than the first one. I rated the first one, I think, 3 stars. It was, in my opinion, kind of lackluster. I was like, yeah, this is par for the course for a Regency era romance. Is it Regency? Yes. Regency era romance. This one I thought was much more interesting. I thought the characters were more interesting. There's also a really fun game of croquet where everyone's just like out for blood, and it's the best. I need to buy a house with a lawn so I can have similarly bloodthirsty croquet games with all of my nearest and dearest. So the premise is that Anthony, the oldest son, and I think, yeah, first child of the Bridgerton family, he's the Viscount now, and he thinks that he's going to die before he turns, I think, 40, because that's when his father died. And there's a whole author's note about how this is apparently like a common thing if a parent dies, especially among men, is that they believe that they will not exceed that number of years in their own lifetime. So at first I thought it was kind of weird that he would think that, but then I read the author's note and it all made sense. So he's like, I'm getting long in the tooth. I need to get married, provide an heir for the viscountcy, and before I, just die. So since I can't love anyone, clearly, I need someone who is smart and beautiful and nice and gets along with my family, because obviously he's going to die, but his widow would have to, continue to be one of his family. So he was like, all of these things, I'm going to marry this lady, even though I've never met her, because she ticks all my boxes. And this girl has, I think, just made her debut, and she's the most sought after woman of this debut, I think. So she's a renowned beauty. She has an older half sister who's like, well, I'm not gonna let this weird random playboy who's notorious just like decide to marry my sister without like talking to her. That's dumb. And so she tries to cockblock them at every opportunity, and unsurprisingly, they fall in love instead. It was pretty funny. Like, this was a fun book. Okay, so that's everything I read in November. Time for stats. I read 12 books and 4,032 pages and an average rating of 78.33. So pretty good going for November. And let's move on to December. So first I read A Spindle Splintered by Alex E. Harrow. Alex E. Harrow wrote one of my favorite books of 2020. The witch one, I forgot what it's called. The Once and Future Witches, that's it. That was great. This one was a novella, so I think I definitely preferred The Once and Future Witches, but I will read the subsequent novellas in this series because they're fairy tale retellings, and I love a fairy tale retelling. So the main character has been diagnosed with a chronic illness, and so she's a sleeping beauty, and her best friend is a scientist. They're, I think, in high school, or maybe they've just graduated high school. They're very young women. So something weird happens. She gets like flung into another dimension where she meets another sleeping beauty. And so she somehow like uses science to contact her best friend, who was like, how about we connect all of the sleeping beauty universes and try to stop the sleeping beautiness? And she's like, can science do that? And her friend is like, well, I guess you got flung into another dimension, so yeah. And they all work together, and it's great. And I think the discussions on chronic illness are also really important and felt very accurate to me. And so I'm excited for more fairy tale retellings from Alex E. Harrow. Then I read A Winter's Promise by Christelle Dabeau. This is the first in the something or other series. I can't remember what the series is called, but I thought it would be a nice wintry book to round out the beginning of winter in December. And I mean, I guess it was. It did have wintry vibes. I thought it was really weird. I thought it was such a wild ride. And even though I didn't like it a ton, I didn't dislike it, but I wasn't amazed by it. It was so weird that I need to know where it goes. And so I will be reading the rest of this series. So the premise is this young girl is living on a space rock, and also her family have like an ancestor ghost who is giant. And the ancestor ghost is like, I see you like working in the archives, but too bad you're gonna marry this dude from an ice shard. And she's like, I don't really want to though. Who even is that? And then he appears and he doesn't really like her either. But then they're like, well, too bad you're engaged now. So off you go to the ice shard. And so she goes to his like ice rock in space and hangs out at his house with her aunt, who's her chaperone. And the family is really weird and something's off. And so she's like, huh. And then it's really like super casually mentioned that people just like murder each other around here. And she's like, this doesn't sound great, honestly. And then she learns more about the politics of the ice rock. And she's like, can I get out of this engagement? Turns out she can't. And then it's just a wild ride. I'm not even sure how to explain it. A bunch of stuff happens. She gets involved with politics. Politics here is a nightmare. I'm glad I don't live there. Yikes. Then I read Alice's Adventures in Wonderland and Through the Looking Glass and What Alice Found There. I have this bind up of both books in one, but I did count them as two different books because they are two different books. They're children's classics. I've definitely read Alice's Adventures in Wonderland before, but not Through the Looking Glass. So I'm now caught up on this duology, I guess you could say. And it was solid. I enjoyed it. It was felt very much like a bad drug trip, but I'm pretty sure that's actually what it was. So cool. Then I read Arthur and George by Julian Barnes. I liked this but didn't love it. It's based on real people. Arthur is Sir Arthur Conan Doyle and George is George something or other who is a lawyer. I think he was a solicitor. And I think his father came from India, I think. And so he is half Indian with an Indian sounding last name. And so he's the victim of a lot of discrimination in the 1800s. And then he makes friends with Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. And I've forgotten most of what actually happens, but at some point George is accused of a crime that he did not commit. And I think Arthur helps him out to have him declared innocent because he clearly is. So yeah, it was solid. I don't think I'll read it again, but I did enjoy it. Then I read The Colonial South Africa and the Origins of Racial Order by Tim Keegan. This is a book that I started in December of 2020. In December of 2020, and put it down for a while because I didn't need it. I'd like extracted all the bits that I would need for research, and because I hate not finishing a book, I did go back to it and finish the rest of it that wasn't immediately relevant. It's a good academic text. If you, I guess, want to learn more about the history of South Africa, then yes, read this. It is quite like dense academic language, so if you're just like doing it for the lols, I guess don't read this, or be aware of that, I guess. Then I read Hercule Poirot's Christmas by Agatha Christie. This is a Christmas murder mystery, which I decided to read in December because it is the Christmas season. It was really good. I really enjoyed it. So Hercule Poirot is he in Wales somewhere? No, he's not in Wales. He is somewhere in the country. This family is having a Christmas party. There's a lot of like estranged relatives all coming together. There's a lot of tension, and the old guy that lives there, who's the patriarch of this family, is quite old. He's also real rich after discovering diamonds in South Africa. So I thought it was a nice tie-in to the Timothy Keegan book, but maybe that's just me. And then he's murdered, and the local police come to help out, but it seems like everyone has a motive, but also everyone has an alibi. So that's weird. But luckily, Hercule Poirot is next door. So they come and ask him to help out. And he's like, sure, and solves everything. Wow. Then I read Little Women by Louisa May Alcott. This is my third reread of this, and I really like it. I do skip the chapter on the shelf or whatever it's called because it's so much misogynist garbage, but I skip it, and the rest of the story is wonderful and wholesome, and I really like it. You probably have, if you haven't read it, seen a movie adaptation of it. There are 4, and there's also a TV miniseries, but there's only 2 episodes of it, so I don't think it counts as a movie, but maybe, I don't know. I haven't seen that one, but I've seen all the other ones. My favorite is definitely the 1949 version, even though the 2019 version is the best, but I think just a lot of nostalgia is wrapped up in the 1949 version. Anyway, the premise is 4 sisters are living with their mom in New England in the 1860s. Their father is off fighting the American Civil War, and they are dealing with not exactly like poverty, but certainly reduced circumstances. So they also make friends with the dude that lives in the big house with his grandfather next door, and he is of course fabulously rich, but he doesn't have a whole lot of family, and he's the only child, so he's like, great, I am now also a part of this family, and everyone's happy. And then eventually they all get married to various people, and it's just like very wholesome. Then I read On Earth We Are Briefly Gorgeous by Ocean Vuong. I read this for a book club, but then ended up not being able to attend the book club meeting, so I don't know what everyone else thought of this. I thought it was really great. It was a fast read because it's very short, but it's also an intense read. Like, there's a lot of talk about like identity and motherhood and the relationship between mothers and sons, etc. So it is like heart bruising, but really well written and very good. Then I read The Absolutely True Diary of a Part-Time Indian by Sherman Alexie, and again, this is like a heart-bruising one. There are parts where it's really funny, and there are parts where it's so devastating, but it's an easy read as well. It's pretty short, and there are a lot of like illustrations. So I think the author, it's not like his diary, but it's like based on his experience. So the main character, he lives on a Native American reservation, goes to the res school, and at some point his teacher is like, you can't stay here. Your life here is so bleak, you need to do something and get out of there. So he ends up going to just like a public school, I think a half an hour ride away, and this is met with like some pushback from his community because they're like, you're abandoning us, blah blah. But I think does he play basketball? Yeah, I think he plays basketball for them, and he really enjoys basketball. It's the thing he really finds comfort in, and so he sort of struggles to make friends, and it's touching and sad and funny and depressing and just like everything rolled into one. It's really good. Then I read The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison. This is my third Toni Morrison. I think my favorites are Song of Solomon, then The Bluest Eye, then Beloved. So I've already like forgotten so much of this, like so many of the details, but the main character is a young Black girl who wishes that she could blend in with the like more white beauty standards of the US, and she wishes she had blue eyes. And then the story follows her and like her community as she and her peers grow up. And this is another one that's really sad at times, but is wonderfully written, and I really enjoyed it. Then I read The Crimson Puddle and the White by Michelle Faber, and this is a wild ride. It's a really long book, but really expertly crafted. I loved it. So is it the 1870s? I think it is. And we follow this young sex worker. She's 19, and she is really good at her job, good enough that she can like buy herself nice things and nice books. So, and she has like a few friends. And so we sort of like see her in that environment. And then this guy who is like so unhappy with his life, he's married someone he doesn't really like that much. He has a daughter that he doesn't like that much. He thinks that his older brother should have started working at this perfumery that his family owned, but his older brother is like super into religion and is kind of wanting to be not priest, what do they call it? The Church of England priest equivalent. He's not interested in the perfumery, so the main guy, William, has to run this perfumery. He hates it. He hates his job. He hates that his dad is putting so much pressure on him, and basically he's so unhappy with his life that he takes out this frustration on like going out with his dumb friends and sex workers. So the two of them meet, and he's like, wow, this girl Sugar is amazing. I have to better my life so I can give her a better life. And so she sort of like becomes his mistress and really helps him out in his business and in his like personal life. And she's basically the brains behind like all the copy of the advertising that the perfumery does, etc., etc. And she basically sees this as a business opportunity. She makes herself invaluable to him, and hoping that he would then, you know, continue to take care of her, because otherwise, like, what is she going to do with her life? Like, she can continue to work in sex work in like I don't want to say brothel, in a house with other sex workers, but there's no like upward mobility there. And so she sees this as her way to gain stability in her life. And but this guy is like totally terrible. He's like a typical like nice guy. I think he's very similar to the creepy guy from the dollhouse. No, the doll factory, but like not as overtly like stalkerish. He's covertly stalkerish. He's like a toned down version of this guy. And it's like upsetting to read in some places because like mental health treatment at this time was not good. Sanitary standards were not good. Women's rights were famously not good. And so it's a tough story to get through, but it was really well written and like the characters have great depth. Then I read The Empress of Salt and Fortune by Ni Vo. This is a reread for me. I read it in, I think, 2020. I listened to the audiobook this time, and it was a really good audiobook. The story is a young scribe is going around this empire and talking to people with interesting stories to tell so she can write them down, put them in the library. And so she talks to the former servant of the empress, and basically the empress had married someone. She'd married into this family, this royal family, but they didn't treat her very well. But being a smart woman, she overthrew them. So, and it's now her empire, or it was her empire. I think maybe she's deceased at this point. I can't remember. But it's a really like wild story of politics. It has a sort of fairy tale storytelling vibe to it, even though it's not really a fairy tale. And yeah, it's really good. It feels magical. And so I will definitely be rereading this in the future. Then I read The Paris Apartment by Lucy Foley. I got this as a NetGalley e-arc, and I have read Lucy Foley's other two books, The Hunting Party and The Guest List, and both really liked them, so I thought I would read this and probably like it too. I did. It's another classic closed door mystery. A girl with sort of like a semi-shady past goes to Paris from the UK because that's where her brother lives. I think they have an age gap. Is he older? It doesn't matter. Basically they're each other's only family, and they're not very close, but they're always there for each other. So he's like, yeah, sure, come to my flat, ring, and I'll let you in. And she's like, cool. She gets there and she rings and her brother doesn't answer. So she calls him, he doesn't answer. And she's like, this is suspicious. So she like gets into the building, finagles her way in, and her brother is like not there. There's some things that are like kind of weirdly out of place, even though he's quite neat. And then she finds out that he is he's a journalist. She finds out he's looking at like a developing story, and he's told his editor that he has a big scoop. And so she contacts his editor and is like, have you heard of him, from him? What's the big scoop? And he's like, he told me there was a big scoop, but he didn't tell me what the scoop was. And so she's like, oh no. And everyone else in the apartment is acting really weird. And then she unravels the mystery, and it's a lot. So yeah, would recommend. This one's a fun one. Then I read The Romanovs by Virginia Cowles. I read her other book on another family. Was it the Astors? Yes, it was the Astors, earlier in 2021. And like, I liked it as a like history of the family. The writing was a bit yikes. I mean, she was writing in the 70s, so I guess that is not a huge surprise, but this was similar. This was better. There wasn't any of like the racism that was in the Astor book, so that's an improvement, I guess. But I already had this book, so I didn't buy it after reading the Astor's book, and because I wouldn't have. I won't be buying any of her other books. But this was about the Romanov family, as you might guess, starting in the 1600s and their ascent to the throne of the Russian Empire, and all the way up to the execution / assassination of Tsar Nicholas and his family. So it's pretty like short bursts, so you get a good overview and like little insights into what people were doing, what their personalities were like. It's not like super in depth, but it's a good overview. And then last I read Will Grayson by John Green and David Levithan. This is my first David Levithan. I really enjoyed John Green's writing, so I had high hopes, but I really didn't like this book. The vibe was just like off for me. I was like, I don't care about any of these people. Maybe it's just that I've outgrown this type of genre, but I read like the first 50 pages of this and was like, I don't like anyone here, but I've started it, so now I need to finish it. One day I will be good at DNFing and letting things go, but today is not that day. So I finished the rest of the book and really didn't like it. I've already forgotten so much about it. But essentially, two people named Will Grayson meet, and they have very different lives, and they team up to help sort each other's lives out. So that is it for December. I know this is a long video. Thank you for sticking around this long. And I read 17 books in December, an average rating of 78%, and I read a total of 5,567 pages, which I think is pretty good. I would like to take this energy into the new year. I think I am. It's all going well. So thank you so much for watching. Please like and subscribe, and I will see you next time. Bye, guys.